Thursday. We're going to be talking about training until failure today. I hopped on here just a few minutes early so, the algorithm can start picking up the stream and people know that it's here. And so I could show you my awesome shirt. As you can tell, I love cats. I love Christ, cats and Christ. Kind of has a nice ring to it. We'll get started in just a few moments. Until then, when you drop into the chat, say hello. Let me know what you think of my shirt. Are you a cat person? Are you a dog person? Are you an animal person? Give me your vote in the chat. Curious to hear. I'm an animal person, but I do have 2 cats, so I definitely love cats, and I love this shirt. And training and kettlebells, of course. Our kettlebells are back there. I know they're kind of hidden. The stall bar is sort of missing in action today, but it's back there. It's over there. So today we're going to be talking about training until failure, yay or nay. So I've gotten questions and comments about this many times as a trainer. People are like, oh, don't I need to train until failure in order to get results? Or, people wondering about, how often should they train until failure? And we're going to talk about all of that today. We're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to train until failure? What does the science say about training until failure? And what are my personal thoughts as a coach on training until failure? So that's what we'll cover today, but I'm gonna give it a few more minutes because it's not quite 3:30 yet. Say hi in the chat if you're here. Curious to know who's joining today. Hopefully some of you are joining me today from yesterday's full body kettlebell workout. If you missed that workout, it's a great one. You can still do it. All you need to do is go to my YouTube channel, hit the live tab at the top, and then you'll see that the replay is there. So you can go back and join in and try out that workout. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts if you do give it a try. And for anybody who's here from yesterday, how are you feeling today? Are you a little bit sore? You feel pretty good? What did you think of the workout? Let me know. Hi, AJ. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully everybody's having a good week this week. We're almost at the end of February already. I feel like we just started 2025 and now we're already almost into March. We're getting into springtime. Hopefully things are going to get a little warmer, won't be as dark. Okay, I shouldn't really be complaining because I live in a sunny state here. But I know that it's been kind of a cold, dark winter for many. So praying for a sunnier, warmer time for you. So today we're going to be talking about training until failure. AJ said, are we alone? I don't think so. I think there's a handful of other people here. The chat hasn't been super active lately for some reason, but would love for you guys to jump in if you have any comments, questions, thoughts, or requests for next week's live, because I might just choose the topics for next week's live after we get off of this live today. So if you have any suggestions for next week, drop them in the chat during today's talk. Okay, so we're gonna get into it. So training until failure. I'd love to see like a show of hands or hearts in the chat. Have you trained to failure before? Or are you a fan of training until failure? Or if you're not, you can give me a thumbs down. Let me know in the chat what your thoughts are on training until failure. And I'm going to be sharing my thoughts at the end of today's talk on training until failure. So as I mentioned, this is something I regularly get asked about as a personal trainer. There's many people out there that think, training until failure is the way to go, coaches included. So what is training until failure? What do I mean by training until failure? So what I mean is going until you cannot complete an exercise with proper form or your muscles can no longer produce the force necessary, so you literally fail on the repetition. So say you're doing bicep curls, and you're going, you get to a rep and you just, you get to here and you're trying so hard and you just can't come up anymore, okay? So that would be training until failure, completing a set of repetitions until failure. Sometimes you'll see it RUF, rep until failure. You'll see some people write it like that. So this can also be a way to find your true 1 repetition maximum. So you may see people talk about with strength training, my 5 rep max is this, or 5 RM. RM means rep max, repetition maximum, 1 RM, 2 RM, etc. So if you go until failure, it may be a way that you can calculate your 1 rep maximum. So again, if you were doing that bicep curl with a certain weight and a certain number of repetitions, there's like different charts where you can calculate, okay, if you can do, say, 17 repetitions with 20-pound dumbbells, then you could use that chart to calculate, okay, so my 1 rep max would be about this for a dumbbell bicep curl, for example. So that is what I mean by training until failure. So if you've ever done that before, let me know in the chat. Let me know your thoughts. As you can imagine, training until failure is quite difficult, both physically and mentally, because there are times where you may physically still be able to get to continue, but it's so uncomfortable that psychologically it's hard to keep yourself going because you have to suffer quite a lot to really get to the point where you fail. There may be a point where it's starting to get really hard and you just want to stop, but that's different from training or repping until failure, literal muscular failure. Your muscles cannot do another rep. So it is quite uncomfortable. And why would you do this? Why would you train until failure? So people say, by people, it's coaches, some studies, some organizations, there is evidence to support that training until failure maximizes muscle hypertrophy by recruiting more muscle fibers. So the harder you're contracting, the more energy you have to muster in order to get closer to that failure, or to that failure, the more muscle fibers are engaged, so you get maximal muscle hypertrophy. And muscle hypertrophy means the size of your muscles. So that indicates that training until failure is going to have some kind of an effect on muscle hypertrophy, the size that your muscles get to, okay? There's some people out there that would say something like, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. That might be something that people apply to this. Ohio Thunder just asked, what are we talking about? We're talking about training until failure, strength training until failure, physical training until failure, mostly strength training specifically, and why people recommend training until failure, and then we're going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on that. Hi, OK Town. Thanks for joining. You're welcome, Ohio Thunder. So if anybody has ever done strength training until failure, let me know in the comments. AJ, Ohio Thunder, OK Town, if you guys have any thoughts on that. If you've ever tried it, let me know, or if not, you can just say no or give me a thumbs down. So it just to quickly recap for those of you who jumped on, training until failure means you are completing the number of repetitions until you get to a place where you literally cannot complete the rep. So say you're doing a bicep curl, you're going, you literally can't complete the rep to the top and you fail. Okay, your muscles can't produce the force necessary. That's failure, training until failure. So some people say that this has an effect on your muscle hypertrophy, or the size that your muscles, like the size of your muscles, okay? Now, what does the science say? So there are, what I found upon doing a little bit of research on this as I was preparing for this live, is that there was a 2024 meta-analysis on studies about training until failure. So meta-analysis, they kind of take all these different studies and they look at all the results and they kind of combine them together and see ultimately what's the conclusion. What are the scientific studies saying about training until failure? So last year, they did this meta-analysis that shows that strength gains are minimally impacted by training until failure. They're minimally impacted by how close the sets are until failure, and muscle hypertrophy tends to increase the closer you get to failure. So I thought this is pretty interesting, right? So it's essentially telling you that you will get more muscle hypertrophy the closer you train to failure, but you don't necessarily get stronger the closer you train until failure. So that's not per se correlated. So there's a difference there, right? So you could have, really big muscles and not actually be like super, super strong. An example of this would be if you compare a bodybuilder, if you look at a bodybuilder, they've got all the muscles are showing, right? They're like super big muscles, okay? Versus a power lifter. And some power lifters, they may not even really look like they work out, but they can lift a ton of weight. So they are super, super strong. So that's where you'll see a difference between, a goal of muscle hypertrophy in bodybuilding and a goal of strength in powerlifting. Not saying one is better than the other. It depends on what your goals are. But strength isn't necessarily predicated on training close to failure. You don't need to train close to failure to get stronger. That being said, you also don't need to train to close to failure to get hypertrophy. But there is some evidence to suggest that maybe you get more hypertrophy the closer you train until failure. What the exact percentage difference would be though, like versus, training within, 20% of failure versus actually going, into failure, what the difference is and how big your muscles will get. I don't know. I don't think there's a study that shows that. So that's something that also, is highly individualized. So that might be something that you'd have to try to find out. So hold on, I gotta close my window because like a loud noise just started. All right, I'm back. Okay, so OK Town said, is that what I need to gain weight? I lose too much, so I do too much training, I lose weight. Why is that? OK Town, I'm not sure I understand your question. If you could clarify it for me, are you asking whether you need to train until failure to gain weight, like gain muscle? Okay, so first of all, that meta-analysis said that hypertrophy, yes, there's some evidence to say that the closer you train to failure, you're going to see some gains in hypertrophy, but strength is not predicated on that, okay? So there are also, I think this is really important, this is an important one to me as somebody who has very frequently overtrained and still struggles to find a good balance with exercise, and I know there's many out there that push themselves hard. Some studies suggest that training until failure for a prolonged period of time leads to overtraining. Okay, this is kind of common sense if you think about it, right? If you push yourself until an empty gas tank and you do that day after day after day, what's going to happen after a while? You're going to break down, right? It's the same as like the battery on your cell phone, right? If you let the battery drain all the way to zero day after day after day, it's actually going to wear down your battery over time. You're going to have to get a new battery. It's best not to let your phone die every time. It actually wears out your battery. So same idea for our bodies. If we push ourselves to the max, to failure over and over again, multiple times a week for months, for a long time, that's going to break us down. It's going to lead to overtraining. So if you want to train until failure, it's something that should be best done sparingly because you don't want to risk overtraining. Trust me, it is not worth it. It's much better to undertrain and feel like you're not quite, just not quite as fit as you want to be than to go over. Because if you're not quite as fit as you want to be, well, you can always keep working on it. But if you go overboard and you go too far, it is a long, long process. I just know from personal experience, it's taken over a decade and I still haven't fully recovered from the damage that I did to my body, the cascade of effects that happen as a result. So you want to, be cautious with training until failure if it's something that you want to try. AJ said, I never experienced this kind of program. Many problems, issues can appear long-term view if we don't listen enough to our body. Absolutely, 100% agree. I tell that to students all the time. Please listen to your body. A discussion we recently had in a Facebook group that I run, which is about kettlebell solo. You're welcome to join if you're interested in kettlebell solo. In this group, we had kind of a poll where we asked, how do you determine whether it's time to rest or time to work out? And it's like, okay, I follow the program. I listen to my coach. I check in with my body, you know, I look at what other people are doing, or like, I don't know. And it's interesting to see many of the people in the group, because they've been part of the program that I offer, and they know that I encourage listening to the body, and many of them have learned that, and some of them the hard way. Most of them said, you know, I check in with my body and see how I'm feeling. But some people said, you know, I follow the program, or I listen to my coach. And there's benefits to following the program and listening to your coach. And when it comes down to it, the most important thing is, you know, checking in with your body and making sure that you listen to your body. So great point, AJ. Hi, DJ. Thanks for joining. Hopefully I didn't miss you. AJ said, what do you think of a kind of Bulgarian method applied to kettlebells? I'm not sure what you mean by that, AJ. If you can clarify for me. I don't know what the Bulgarian method for kettlebells is. I know what a Bulgarian bag is, but I don't know what Bulgarian method for kettlebells is. Okay, so we talked about what training until failure is. We talked about kind of what the science says. If you guys have questions on anything I said so far, drop it in the chat. Now I'm going to tell you my thoughts on training until failure. Okay, Huddy Lifts has a good question here. At some point, especially if you're working out at home, you'll have minimal equipment, and once you get to the point where you can max out the weight, training till failure will be necessary. Do you agree? No, I don't agree. I don't agree training until failure is necessary, and I'm going to share why in a minute. I know that if you have minimal equipment and maybe you don't have a ton of weight, you got to get a little bit creative, but there's many other ways to progress your exercise without just increasing weight. It's only one metric, and honestly, it's not the best way to do it, because you can't just go up forever. Even if you had the weights available, you need periods of time where you scale back. You need periods of time where you do other things, where you work on your weaknesses with lighter weights, etc. And using weight to progress yourself is one way that you can, but there's many others. Obviously, volume is another, but I also don't recommend just pushing the volume, because it's a similar thing where you're going to failure. You can adjust the exercises that you're doing, make the exercises that you're doing, give yourself a variation of the exercise that's more difficult with a lighter weight or with body weight. You can also speed up or slow down your tempo. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that you could do isometrics. There's different ways that you can add intensity. So I don't agree that you need to train until failure, especially at home. Now let me tell you my thoughts, because this will give you an idea of what I think about this. So training until failure carries a high injury risk. Okay, so there is a high risk with training until failure. Why? Because you're pushing your limits. Okay, with anything that you're pushing your limits physically, there's always going to be an injury risk. And depending on the way that you're training until failure, if you're not sure like how frequently to do it, and just anytime you're pushing yourself that hard, you risk injuring yourself. And as we get older, that injury risk gets higher, because number one, our ego overestimates what we can do, or, we did it 10 years ago, so we think we can do it now. As we get older, it's harder to recover from injuries. Many people have been sedentary for a long time. It may not be the best thing to just go 0 to hero, okay? So it carries a high injury risk. Unless you are a bodybuilder, where a small percentage difference in how much muscle hypertrophy you have is really, really important to you, and we could also talk about whether that's healthy. I personally don't think bodybuilding at performance level or at a high level is healthy. It's, an extreme. But unless you're a bodybuilder, having the biggest muscles you can possibly have is not necessary or worth it. Again, this is my opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be your opinion, but I'm just telling you my opinion, my thoughts, for those who are curious to hear. So it's probably not worth it for the majority of people. If you're just trying to get fit, you're trying to stay healthy and live a long, healthy life where you can do the things you want to do, training until failure may not be worth it for you. Especially as we age, okay? So training until failure is not necessary to get fit and strong. Is it a way that you can increase strength and fitness? Yes, it is a way. But for me personally, and for the people that I program for, which mostly is online at this point, I would not feel comfortable prescribing a training until failure type of programming, because it carries such a high risk. Would I be more comfortable doing that in person with somebody and helping them push their limits? Yes, because I have a little bit of a better gauge. We can communicate as we're going through, but still, it's not something that I've ever done with my clients is go until failure, because it's not needed. Most people are not at a place where they need to do that in order to see progress. And if you don't need to do it to see progress, why do it when it has a high injury risk? If you enjoy suffering, you can do it now and then, okay? I'm talking as somebody who competed in kettlebell sport for many years, and kettlebell sport is like 10 minutes, as many reps as you can with 2 kettlebells. You can't set them down. So you're going, if not to failure, you're going to exhaustion. So I know that for some of us, we enjoy the suffering, okay? We enjoy the suffering of training until failure or pushing until exhaustion. So you can do it now and then, but you don't have to, and it's best to do it now and then. If you're training until failure every week or multiple times a week, I would say, especially if you're over the age of 45, it's too much. You're putting too much risk out there. Again, I'm not saying you can't train until failure over that age. You absolutely can if you want to, but generally you don't need to. I have done plenty of training until failure or exhaustion. Like I just told you, I enjoyed it. But part of the reason I did it personally was because I felt I had something to prove. I felt I wanted to push myself, and it was ultimately unhealthy for me. The way that I was doing it, which was doing it regularly a lot, pushing myself very hard, and doing it from an unhealthy place emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, it was not healthy for me. So it may be worth, if you do like to train until failure a lot and constantly push yourself and push your limits, it may be worth asking yourself, why do I do that? Is it ultimately the healthiest way that I can train? Could I maybe scale it back a little and see the same or better results because I have more time to recover? It may just be worth asking that question. Rattle said, if you're not training till failure, you should just stick to cardio for better health. I think it's a waste of time if you aren't. PPHDH agrees. I'm curious to hear why you think that, because, well, first of all, I'm curious to hear if you are a personal trainer or coach. Is this based on just your personal experience or people you've worked with? Because I've worked with many hundreds of people, and many of them, every single one I trained, we didn't do training until failure and they saw benefit. I also think, depending on your age and depending on what your goals are, so it's I think that's an extremely silly statement to make, and I could not disagree with you more. But I'm open to hearing what you have to say. I'm not. I could be wrong. Chaco asked, how often do you train, and what duration is each session? Well, that's for me, it really varies, but I've been strength training for a long time, so it's fairly easy for me to retain, what's the word I'm looking for? Retain the results that I've built over the last, 20 years or so. So I wouldn't base what you should do for training on what I do. There is no golden rule on how often you should train or how long you should train. It really depends on the person. I've seen people have success with training 3 times a week for 10 minutes and make progress on their weight loss and fitness journeys. I know people that train 5 days a week for an hour, and they see benefits. I used to train 6 days a week for 2 hours. 3 hours. That didn't work for me, though, over the long run. So you have to and that can also shift depending on what you have going on in your life and different seasons of your life. So there's different ways to do it. If you want to know specifically how I program for people, that's something that you could take a look at the training programs on my website, or kettlebellsolo.com is where I teach classes and programs if you want like really specific details on it. Mark Zuckerberg. Someone said I look like Mark Zuckerberg. That's funny. Okay, so I think it's really interesting the comments you okay, let's see. PPHDH says, training till failure every day, train 3 years, not till failure, then switch to failure for 2 years, lost 10% body fat, gained 20 pounds. So yeah, it works. Curious to hear PPADH, HDH, feel a little funny saying that because how old are you? And are you a man or a woman? Just curious to know. I'm not saying that that's not true. I think, and again, it could, I'm not saying that training until failure can't work or be useful. I just think for most people, it's not worth the risk and you don't need to do it. So you're welcome to disagree because it worked for you, but just because it worked for you doesn't mean it works for everybody. So again, it may be useful. It doesn't mean it works for everyone. So certain things, you know, that I do may not work for everybody. Maybe it worked for me, but it may not work for everyone. Something that works for someone else may not work for me. So I think it's important to take that into consideration rather than having statements where it's like absolute, like, oh, if you're not training till failure, it's not even worth it. I think you want to think about whether you're a trainer or just a regular person, you know, that's loves to exercise. If you're telling people, unless you train until failure, it's not worth it. For some people, that's really inaccessible because some people are not ready to train until failure. So I think, you know, hey, just because it works for you, and PPHDH just said, I'm a 23-year-old guy in South African, so it's in my genes. So if you are in your early 20s and you're a guy, I'm sorry, but I think I'm not going to take what you say as gospel for everybody else, because when you're a guy that's in your 20s and you're training really hard, that's a totally different case than later on in life, somebody who's 55, female, overweight. That's a different situation. So I think it's important to consider that before you say an absolute statement. Rattles said, if you're older and don't or can't train to failure or close to failure, sticking to cardio is much better for health overall, since you won't be building much muscles, if any, training lightly. So I'm curious, Rattles, why you think that if you're not training until failure, you won't build muscle. Because I actually have built more muscle since I stopped training all the time and training to exhaustion and training with lighter weights in the last 5 years than I ever did before, and I was training all the time. So I think that's not true, because just because it's your experience, you know, I think it's great that, I mean, cardio is good, but you absolutely can build muscle not until failure. I'm curious where you got that idea that you can't build muscles if you're, and there's also a difference between training light, training moderate, training heavy, training to failure, somewhere in between those. So it's not just like you train until failure or you train with a 3-pound dumbbell and you get no results. That's a very black and white perspective to have. Triple C Pro Window Cleaning said, I'm an older dude. I started lifting regularly about 4 months ago, almost never to failure. My arms are in beast mode right now. That's awesome. That's great. See, we got an example of somebody who is getting good results, doesn't necessarily need to train to failure, or maybe every once in a while he trains until failure, but it doesn't need to be every time. DJ said, everything I read indicates that strength training is much more important than cardio, plus my cardiologist told me this as well. Yeah, I think both of them are important, and I think strength training is a great bang for your buck. I'm actually loving this conversation, though. I love it. I love that, you know, Rattles and PPHDH brought their thoughts on it. I love that Triple C Pro Window Cleaning is giving his thoughts. DJ's giving her thoughts. AJ's chiming in. Chaco said people above 40 must stretch often. Stretching can be very helpful. Also, if you strength train and mobility train in the right way, you may not necessarily need to stretch to improve your range of motion, but if you like to stretch and it helps you, that absolutely can be useful. David Washington said, rest and repair equals great results. I love that. Absolutely, you need that rest, and how much rest you need is going to vary. For the guys who are in their, you know, early 20s, you guys are going to bounce back like nothing, right? You're going to be able to maybe train until failure multiple times a week, and maybe you'll be able to maintain that, you know, throughout your whole life. I don't know. It's definitely possible. And you may find that your recovery time slows and you may not be able to train to failure as often. I definitely have noticed that for myself, being in my mid-30s, that it's definitely not the same as when I was 22. PPHDH said, I'm doing judo and rugby, just gymming consistently 4 times a week with lots of running, came from a boxing background. What is your take on intermittent fasting? My personal take on intermittent fasting, I don't recommend it. I have done it in the past. Now, I do believe that there's a difference for men and women here. I think it's very difficult for women to do intermittent fasting in a way that doesn't mess with their hormones, because the female body needs nutrition in order to feel safe and to have proper hormonal and reproductive function. So personally, I did intermittent fasting for a number of years while I was overtraining. It was a disastrous combination. Personally, I've found I feel a lot better, perform better, and get better results with eating regular meals. It's very difficult for me to get the amount of nutrition that I need in a small window. Like I had have a hard enough time being an active person, getting enough food in a full day. So squishing that window down is personally not something that worked well for me. And it's not something I recommend. First of all, I'm a personal trainer and I don't coach nutrition. So anything I say about nutrition is really just like my personal experience and opinion. I don't recommend one thing or the other. So yeah, my personal experience is that it didn't work well for me. Jao, thanks for joining us. You say you're just a runner. That's okay. You can join us. You're not just a runner. You're a runner. That's great. South to West said, wow, lots of opinions on this topic. You said it. You said it, South to West, that it was like something going around on social media. I hadn't even seen that. I just know that somebody requested this topic on a previous live, so I thought I would address my thoughts on it. My personal training routine these days, I never train until failure. Like I said, I used to compete in kettlebell sport. I used to push myself, not quite to failure, sometimes to exhaustion at the very least. But that was more of a like endurance. It's more of an endurance sport. It's not. No, it's not like a super heavy weight. So it was more of like just full body like exhaustion. But I don't do that now. In part, why I don't train until failure is because of overtraining so much in my 20s. I'm still, as I mentioned, recovering over a decade later from the damage that I did. And unfortunately, if you have overtrained for a long period of time and just really messed up your balance, I feel my nervous system is very sensitive to intensive training. So if I had not done that, maybe I would enjoy training to failure sometimes now, but because of that, I don't do it. Most of the people that I coach now are above the age of 50, and for many of them, they're just working on getting consistent with exercise. Some of them have a lot of different barriers to being consistent with exercise, so adding like a really difficult workout is just not really doable. You know, if you're trying to set habits, it's better to start with something that's simple, that's easy to stick to. You're going to be better off exercising in any capacity than not exercising, okay? Because the benefits go far beyond building strength and increasing the size of your muscles, okay? Exercising has excellent benefits for, lymphatic drainage, for blood flow, for increasing your lung capacity, your mental health, okay, like a lot of different things that mobility, confidence. So it goes far beyond just, being strong or having muscles. PPHDH said, do you watch Dr. Mike's videos? No, I have not, but I'll have to check it out. Rattle said, let's get things clear. When I say failure, it usually means if you can do 10 clean reps, but stopping at 5, you aren't giving the muscle enough stress for it to grow. Okay, so Rattles, you may have missed what I was talking about earlier. When I'm talking about, at the beginning of the live, I said, okay, by training by failure, I mean you're going until literally your muscles cannot go anymore. Like you're doing, okay, bicep curls, right? And you're like here and literally your muscles will not let you lift the weights anymore. That's what I mean when I say training until failure. DJ said, I thought training to failure means you literally cannot do another rep. Yes, that is training until failure. And so I think Rattles may be talking about training close to failure, which is different from what I'm talking about. Again, I don't think you need to train close to failure to get benefit depending, again, where you are at in your fitness journey. For some people, the progress may not be from pushing anywhere close to failure. It may just be from increasing the frequency of their training, or it may be increasing the duration of the training, or it may just be progressing on particular exercises that are, in different stances, different variations. There's different ways to progress it. So getting close to failure is not needed. It can be a tool you use later on in your fitness journey. Carlton Carter said, what do you call overtraining versus intensive training? That's a great question, actually. I don't know what the scientific definition is, but intensive training on a one-off is like you're training with your heart rate in a high zone, right? Intensive over time is ideally it's smartly programmed. It's programmed to have enough rest and recovery. Like you might be pushing yourself hard on training sessions, but you're giving yourself adequate recovery between workouts, but also perhaps after a certain number of weeks or months, you give yourself some kind of rest period where you take time off, you take a week or two to rest. Like you work those things in if you are doing intensive training. So I say with intensive training, maybe you're towing the line of pushing your limits, but you're also giving yourself, enough rest to let yourself come back and to center. And then maybe you're working your way up there and then you're resetting. If you're overtraining, you're like limit, over, and you just kind of keep going and you never give yourself the rest and you never really let yourself repair the damage. And there's usually, with overtraining, there's some kind of psychological, emotional obsession around exercise and training. I know that for myself, I know that for many people who've reached out to me after I shared about my overtraining story. So there's usually an obsessive nature around it when it's overtraining. And overtraining, it starts with what they call overreaching, I think, where you're training a little bit too much and not quite recovering, okay? And that goes on for a little while and you maybe feel a little run down. Overtraining is like kind of the next level. If you're overtraining, okay? If you're overreaching, you might not be sure, okay? That might be part of intensive training is sometimes you overreach, but if you're overtraining, I can tell you that when I got to a place to kind of like a rock bottom, when I realized holy shit, I'm literally running myself into the ground, I was completely fatigued. I couldn't really function. I didn't want to go to work. I got an infection in my foot. I got sick. I got better. And then I got sick again. I got, all kinds of strange things. I started getting hives, weird shit starts happening. Your body starts breaking down. So that's a whole different level of overtraining when you push yourself way too far without the recovery. David Washington said, know your body. Proteins are key to an active body. It behooves us to limit our intake of supplements with ingredients that our body produces on its own. I would say that's good advice. Proteins are absolutely key. I think the most things you can get the more you can get from your food, the better. PPHDH said, so for recovery, zinc, magnesium, omega-3, D3, K2, creatine, what more would you suggest? I think that depends on the person for sure. I personally, probably the main thing that I take is vitamin D supplement during the winter, and then some vitamin C. Ferber, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Just eat 8 eggs a day and a liter of milk, 9 hours of sleep, and train hard. Ultimate recovery. That's actually not a bad idea. You probably, if you got good sleep, you ate 8 eggs and a liter of milk a day. That's probably not bad. What's your bench? I don't know. I haven't benched in years. Ferber started a YouTube channel. I'll watch that stuff. That's funny. Rattle said, I agree with the last statement. Everybody should do what is working for them, makes them feel good. Any amount of exercise is better than none. Absolutely. EJ said, I heard that muscles don't react to weight training protocol per se. It cares more about loading factors. I believe I'm in your camp, Brittany 61, your old former gymnast here. Yeah, I think, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by loading factors, but I assume you mean it's not just about the amount of weight you use. It's about how you load your body. You know what, Ferber? Just because other people are doing it doesn't mean you should let it stop you from doing it, because clearly you already would have one person, Rattles here, who would follow you. So sorry, was that right? No, it was PPHDH said he would follow you. So you might have to start a channel. You might have to get on that. Yeah, so my personal opinion is just I prefer to work out moderately these days. I've seen good results. Like, I feel like I got like a decent amount of muscle, and I don't train until failure. I don't lift super heavy. I challenge myself sometimes, but I also do like easy workouts where, you know, I get warm, I do some sets, I feel my muscles working, but I'm not like real tired from it. And again, obviously this is colored by my experience of having overtrained and wanting to be gentler with my body. I also think it's very different for men versus women, and depending on what your goals are, women have different cycles. That's going to affect how they train, how hard they train, how they eat, how they feel. Okay, so that's going to be different as well. PPHDH said, so all of us believe in newbie gains. I don't know exactly what that means, of like just that we believe in them. Like, of course there's newbie gains, and I think changing up your training style and how you approach it can be a valuable way to you know, discover different things about your body, because I used to have a very similar outlook to what you guys mentioned, that like if you don't push yourself real hard, there's no point. The harder you push yourself, the better your results. That was the mindset I had when I first started as a personal trainer and I was teaching in gyms. I'm sorry to the people that I made suffer when it was not necessary. And what happens at the end of that, if you just keep doing that, again, some people will take the proper amount of rest and recovery, but if you don't, you get into the place where you overreach and eventually overtrain. And like I said, it can cause a lot of damage. So you're better off moderating it a little bit. And that depends on the type of person you are, because some people are going to struggle with needing to hold themselves back, like somebody like me. Other people are going to really need to get themselves going because they don't want to do any exercise. So, and then there's people in the middle, right, that sometimes struggle with a little bit of either of those or something totally different. So each person is going to have a different journey with that, just like we all have a different journey in life. We have to carry the boats and the logs. Not sure what that means. Yeah, I think I've personally seen an increase both in my muscle hypertrophy and my strength from training a lot easier than I used to in a fraction of the amount of time that I used to train. And I feel like I've been able to maintain fairly well things that I built up over the years. I maintain my cardio fairly well without doing a ton of cardio. I mostly walk and sometimes do some kettlebell stuff that would be considered cardiovascular. But I personally see a lot of benefit from strength training, not anywhere close to failure, and not doing a ton of cardio either. Any other thoughts on training until failure? This has kind of been a fun topic to explore. If you guys have other topics that you want to explore, let me know. We can work it into next week. Thanks, PPHDH. You said, I don't usually enjoy YouTube live streams. You're actually one person not chatting nonsense, so I subbed. I appreciate it. I kind of like it when people come on and they say something like a little bit like, oh, what you're saying is wrong, because I like to have a conversation about it. I'm curious to hear why people think the way they do, and I'm not attached to, well, that's probably not entirely true. I'm somewhat attached to opinions that I have. I think we all are, but I think it's good to hold them, to not cling to them too tightly, and to be like, okay, well, just because I think that, it's colored by my experience with myself or the people I've worked with, and it may not be completely accurate. There's other ways to think about things. Apes strong together. That's right. Apes are stronger together. Old Grizz said, training to failure leads to failure form, leading to potential injury. Yeah, it definitely carries a higher injury risk. And it also depends which exercise you're doing as well. Some exercises may be more safe to train until failure than others. The live is filled with young gym bros at the moment. I don't know why those are the people joining this live, because that's not really it's not really the people I was thinking of attracting with the live, but I guess maybe this topic maybe this topic attracts young gym bros training until failure. It would make sense. Stan Firm said, what about partial repping like inmates? Good question. You know what? Actually, in my training lately, I have been enjoying practicing partial reps, and I never used to do partial reps. So this is another thing I maybe should do a live about. People are always saying, oh, you need to use full range of motion. If you don't use full range of motion, it's not even worth doing. Okay, same idea out there, which there is absolutely a ton of benefit to full range of motion. If you can do full range of motion, it allows you to increase your mobility because you're building strength through that larger range of motion. And there is benefit to partial reps. I would say you want a mix. I think you don't want to always, I think if you were to choose one, it's probably better to do all full range rather than only partial reps. But I think that doing partial reps can be really useful in terms of, working areas that are weaker. I think, yeah, old Grizz said, I like partials mixed in. I think it's great to explore. So I don't think there's anything wrong with partial reps. I used to, earlier on in my training career, before I had explored a little bit more, I was kind of like, look at those partial push-up reps. Like, that's awful. But catch me like 2 weeks ago doing some like partial push-up reps. I was like, these are great, actually. DJ said, got one old lady here. Yes, we love the old ladies. They got so much to offer. They got so much wisdom. Yeah, DJ said, okay, she's saying, wow, you got to the ER in time for TPA, so no walker, no residual deficits from the stroke I had. That's amazing. God bless. I'm glad to hear that. David said, so since you flexed your biceps, which one is your favorite bicep exercise and how many reps? Well, how many reps? It doesn't really matter how many reps. It just depends, okay? How many reps you could do? You could do 3 reps, you could do 5, you could do 10, you could do 20, you could do 30. I don't know. I personally don't do a ton of really high volume because I just have done way too much high volume and I don't really feel I need or want to do it these days. But if you like high volume, you could do it. Just know it takes longer to recover from. As far as my favorite, one of my favorite bicep exercises that I do, again, I mostly work out from home with kettlebells. So one of my favorite exercises is a crush grip bicep curl. Okay, so crush gripping is gonna like get your forearms engaged as well, and then gonna work your biceps. So that's one that I like. Another one that's really great, let's see if I can show it here, but it's a ring exercise. You could do it with a suspension trainer. This might be set up too low for me to do this. So here, this is such a good bicep exercise. Okay, if you keep the false grip on the rings, it's really going to work your biceps and your forearms also. I'm trying to think if there's any other just a good old bicep curl. But I love a slow tempo. So whether that's with this crush grip, or with a dumbbell, doing like a slow tempo, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a great way to build strength and good control through your range of motion. You could do that with a dumbbell, single arm dumbbell, or I like to do like a isometric hold, sometimes doing reps and then like squeezing at the top or holding like a halfway hold. Another great one. PPHDH said long length partials have shown more growth in calf growth. Jeff Nippert approved. I don't know who Jeff Nippert is. Old Grizz said, do you do 21s for biceps, kind of a mix of partial reps and full range of motion? Yeah, I sometimes do that. I'm not sure, I forget what 21s is. But I do, like the other day I was doing kind of like a like partials at the bottom, like partials at the top, and then doing like isometric. So I would say yes, I do that. AJ said, yes, okay, it's your experience, Britt, but if we look on YouTube, we don't find many people practicing long-term kettlebell sport after 5 to 6 years. They stop with it or diminishing the amount of weight. Yeah, kettlebell sport is a very high volume sport. It's very intensive, so it may be natural that maybe people get real intense into it and then maybe they kind of burn out or they want to switch their approach. You know, I think you really, really have to love it and progress it the right way and not overdo it, which is difficult in a high volume sport in order to continue with it for many, many years. There are, you know, some people that do it their whole lives, but I think it is easy. It is very easy to overdo it. I think that might be what you're saying, AJ. PPHDH said, now do the same ring exercise, but stay in the length and partial. The stimulus would be insane. Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great one. Christina said, are there tricep exercises you can show on the rings and or kettlebell? Yeah, I mean, there's so many things you can do to work your triceps. Obviously, you could just do a tricep extension. Here would be kind of like basic, which you could do with a dumbbell as well. You can do presses. Presses are going to work your triceps. I'm trying to think of what... push-ups are an excellent tricep exercise. Honestly, I feel like my triceps got very defined from doing push-ups regularly. As far as the rings goes, again, I might be set up a little bit. Oh, maybe it'll work. Okay, you can do a tricep extension with your rings, similar to what you would do on a TRX. Okay, an extra bonus is going to work your abs a lot. Also, what else? I like a bottoms up press. It's gonna work your shoulders. I also really enjoy a crush grip overhead press, as well as, here's one I really like, is the shoulder rainbow with the kettlebell. Really gonna work your triceps, but also going to work your obliques, your lats, your shoulders, your abs. Yep, Old Grizz has a good one. Close grip floor press, good for triceps. PPHDH said, do you recommend older people use creatine? I personally do because of increased brain health benefits, not even talking about muscle retention. I don't, because I don't personally take creatine. I have maybe taken it once, but didn't really notice so much of a difference. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad idea. If somebody wanted to take creatine, they felt it was right for them, but I don't recommend it. I just stick to working with people on their exercise routine primarily. David said, thank you. The rings remind me of the old high school gym. PPHDH said, pike push-ups. Yep, pike push-ups are another good one. How about this, David? Does that remind you of your high school gym? Did you guys have stall bars? I usually have those in the setup. It's just the lighting here later in the day. It's a little better. It's a little better in this direction. You're welcome, Christina. Let me know if you have any other questions. Anybody else have any favorite tricep exercises they want to share? Drop them in the chat. Yeah, old school. Stall bars. Gotta love them. Dips. Yep, EJ said dips. Dips are a great one. So many ways to do dips. You can do them on a chair. You could do them on some kettlebells. You could do them on some parallel bars. You could do them like on some parallettes. A lot of different ways to do your dips. On a straight bar. PPHDH, our gym just had a big fat gym instructor who held his breath while taking pictures. What does that mean? Like you mean like he was sucking his tummy in while he was taking a picture? Hi, Manveer. Thanks for joining. Well, I'm not sure exactly what your intention was with the comment about that, but I think it's important to remember. It's important, like I think about this when, for many of us who are, if you are a coach or you're an exercise enthusiast and you're in great shape, sometimes it can actually be more intimidating to people who are working on losing weight or getting in shape than having an instructor or someone they're following along with who is not in a perfect shape. Maybe they are overweight. Maybe they're still on their journey of trying to get fit. Those people could actually inspire often more people because they're more relatable for the people that are joining along with them. So I don't think there's anything wrong with there being an instructor there that's, not in the best shape. I think, it's probably not good for him personally, for his health, but maybe he's working on it, So I think it's important not to discriminate against somebody based on their body size, because that's their life and their choice. It may not be the healthiest one. I may not agree that it's a healthy one, but I think they still deserve love and respect. I'm good, Manveer. How are you? Tim, you wish you could go to sleep and never wake up. I'm sorry to hear that. There's many good reasons to wake up. PPHDH said, but would you trust a dentist with rotten teeth? Same goes for a gym instructor. I get what you're saying. And I don't think it's wrong. I think, you're allowed to make that choice to like not follow along with a gym instructor who isn't in great shape, because maybe you feel they're not going to lead you where you don't want to go, which is valid. Because I'm just thinking about what you said. I'm like, if I just had rotten teeth, I probably would be like, okay, you're not following your own advice. He may still have good advice, but it would definitely make it more difficult. I think my main thing is like, I just don't want to condone like just saying mean things about people based on whether they have a lot of body fat, because I think it's harmful. I think it's unkind. So, it doesn't take away that he's still maybe a kind and a good person. Yeah, I think old Grizz has a good way to say it. Everyone has a story. Try not to judge without knowing it. I think that's part of it, is trying to withhold judgment and remembering that, none of us is perfect. We all have our problems, and, before you cast a stone, take the log out of your own eye. Any other thoughts on training until failure? Any other questions or topic requests for next week? PPHDH said he was a lovely guy, just not the best gym instructor. Yeah, There's good ones, bad ones, and not so good ones, and everywhere in between. Hi, Zhao. Thanks for joining. We're kind of joining at the tail end here. PPHDH said deadlifts, yeah or nay. I love deadlifts personally, so I would say yay on that. Thanks for joining from Brazil, Zhao. Where in Brazil are you? Do you live in Rio? AJ said some people gain weight or overweight after having to stop sport for many reasons, health, family, etc. Yep, great point. Sometimes life hits us with a whole bunch of things, and taking care of our own health falls to the wayside. It's definitely something that's common. And I really feel you guys can let me know in the chat if this happened to you. I feel like I didn't really understand a lot of things in life until probably the last couple years, like over the age of 30 and moving into like my mid 30s, my parents getting a little bit older, different things happening, people dying. Like, just life got a lot more real in the last few years for me. When I was in my 20s, I just kind of felt like I'm invincible, I'm gonna live forever, but at the same time kind of felt sort of like purposeless and lost. So I just think, like, if you are in your 20s, like, just life's gonna keep on coming. It gets more complicated as we go along. uh David said, wow, instructor, preacher, LOL, I'm actually a God-fearing athlete. Hey, right on. That's awesome. Yeah, I might be filled with the Holy Spirit today because I had a like a Bible study, so kind of like those things are what I'm thinking about. PPHDH said, do you believe that children should do acrobatics or maybe martial arts for muscle development? Yeah, I think it's great for kids to be active. I think something like martial arts. I think martial arts is a great one. I personally have never done martial arts, but I know some about it and have seen, kids of friends doing martial arts and have heard from people about their experience in martial arts, and that it, not just does it help you build strength, does it help you build mobility and good range of motion, but it also teaches you about like respect, listening, consequences of your actions. Like, I think it teaches a lot of important life lessons. So yeah, I think martial arts are great. I think something like gymnastics is great. I think it's great for kids to be active and do something they like to do. Now that I think about it, you really sound like some of my friends from YWAM Kona. Is that the Christian school in Kona? That's really funny. Old Grizz said, traditional martial arts, not just fighting, but living, is incredible. I'll take your word for it. I don't know enough, but I take your word for it, Old Grizz. Tim said, I don't want to be alive anymore. The reason being is I have no family and friends. I'm tired of being depressed all the time. Tim, I would say that you should pick up a Bible and read it. Maybe join a church community. Know that you are a child of God and you are loved. I think you probably, maybe you do have some people in your life that you think you can't reach out to, but I'm sure that they do care about you. And if not, it's never too late to build a community. Santana said, I like your kitty shirt. It's awesome. Thank you. Me too. It is awesome. It actually happens to be a Hawaii shirt. David said, martial arts is not just limited to physical training. Absolutely. EJ said, martial arts is awesome for proprioception. Yes, I can imagine. Again, I haven't really done much of it. a little play wrestling here and there, but I don't really know enough. But I have heard it's great for many things. PBHDH said, Tim, Jesus is the original debt lifter. He will empower you to become a deadlifter. I've never heard that one before. That's awesome. Old Grizz said, I too, alone, no family, dealing with serious health issues, but life is worth living. Don't give up. That's a powerful message right there. Tim, you may feel like your whole life is ruined, but God can take the greatest mess and turn it into a message. That is from Zach Williams. If you've never listened to his music, I highly recommend listen to his music. I'm gonna post a link in here of one of his songs. I encourage you to listen to it, Tim. Let's see. It's actually it was a song he did live from a prison where he was singing to, people who are incarcerated potentially for life. It's quite a moving video. I highly recommend you guys check it out. It's one of my favorite songs. It's got 97 million views, if that encourages you to watch it. AJ said, don't give up, Tim. Life is worth it. Any other thoughts or requests for next week? I think one topic we're going to go over is hip strength and mobility. That was a request I got at some point last week, I think. Stretching and strengthening the hip flexors. So we'll probably do that one because it sounds like fun. Okay, PPHDH said hip flexors, please. Grip strength was another request. How to begin training for handstands. AJ said great title. Okay, AJ likes the hip flexor one. Stretching. I just kind of feel like if I do a stretching live, I don't know if anybody will show up. I feel like stretching is one of those things that people like, oh, I should stretch, but they don't want to. So I feel like if I do a stretching live, no one will show up. But if that's not true, you can let me know if you want to hear about stretching. Okay, EJ said hip flexors. Okay, great. PPHDH said grip strength comes from using dumbbells. That's right. Strength training improves your grip strength. All right. Well, I think we're winding it down here, and we're already over an hour. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna wrap this up. But remember to join me. I go live 3 times a week. I post it. I'll post it sometimes the next couple days, like what the topics are for next week. Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and then Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. So those are 3 days I'm currently going live. I'll post what the topics are. We'll definitely be doing the hip stretching and strengthening, so stay tuned for that. Thanks South to West. He said great stream. Thanks for joining. PPHDH said don't do just a stretching video, call it mobility, and people will show up. They might. All right, thank you guys for joining. Tim, if you're still watching, I'll be praying for you. I encourage you to, find a church community or find a community, maybe a gym community you could be a part of. Go outside for a walk, take a breath. Don't do anything rash. You're welcome, DJ. I'm glad you like the song. It's a great one. I listen to it all the time. Sometimes I listen to it when I need to cry. Sometimes I listen to it just, give me some hope. I'm probably going to go listen to it after this and say a prayer for Tim and hope that he moves beyond what he's struggling with. Thanks, AJ. Thanks for being here. Thank you guys for participating, and I will see you on Monday. I hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend.